Welcome. 7 Conversations for a Lifetime of Love by Dr. Sue Johnson. This listening experience is designed not merely to recount the text, but to immerse you in the profound emotional resonance and scientific breakthroughs that redefine our understanding of human connection. Together, we will journey into the heart of adult attachment, decoding the primal panics, the destructive dances, and the profound longings that shape our most intimate bonds. Prepare to step out of emotional isolation and engage in the 7 transforming conversations meant to bring you and your partner into a lifetime of secure, lasting love. Chapter 1. A New Light on Love. Love. A revolutionary new view. Throughout human history, the concept of love has been the most potent, most celebrated, and yet the most agonizingly elusive word in our vocabulary. Wars have been waged in its name, grand monuments have been erected to honor its memory, and poets have endlessly attempted to capture its essence. We soar to the heavens when we hear the words, "I love you," and we crash into despair when that declaration is revoked. Yet, despite centuries of philosophical wrestling, the true nature of love has largely remained a mystery. Cynical observers have dismissed it as a rational negotiation, a mere transaction of mutual benefits. Anthropologists and biologists have often reduced it to a genetic imperative, a reproductive strategy designed to keep the human race going. Historians have sometimes framed it as a sentimental invention of medieval troubadours. Even the brilliant mind of Benjamin Franklin could only describe it as an accidental and transient phenomenon. Today, however, we can no longer afford to leave love in the realm of the mystical and undefined. It has simply become too vital to our existence. In our modern era, romantic partnerships have evolved to become the primary emotional anchor in most people's lives. We are currently living through an age of profound social isolation. As sociologists have pointed out, there has been a drastic erosion of social capital, the continuous sympathetic fellowship that neighbors and extended families once offered each other on a daily basis. Most of us no longer reside in tight-knit, supportive communities or live in close proximity to our birth families. We toil through longer work hours, navigate grueling commutes, and have fewer organic opportunities to cultivate deep friendships. Consequently, the immense burden of providing emotional connection, a sense of belonging, and profound comfort has fallen squarely onto the shoulders of our romantic partners. We now expect from a single lover the kind of comprehensive emotional sustenance that our ancestors once drew from an entire village. Given this reality, it is no surprise that contemporary surveys reveal a satisfying romantic relationship as the ultimate life goal for the majority of people, ranking even higher than career achievement or financial prosperity. We must therefore understand what love actually is and how to sustain it. Fortunately, the past few decades have witnessed a revolutionary breakthrough in our comprehension of human intimacy. The emerging scientific consensus reveals that love is not merely a reproductive mechanism or a romantic ideal. It is the absolute pinnacle of human evolution. It is a brilliant, wired-in survival strategy. We are driven to bond with a precious few individuals because those emotional ties provide a safe haven from the terrifying storms of existence. This primal drive to find someone to whom we can turn and say, "Hold me tight," is embedded deep within our DNA. It is a profound, non-negotiable requirement for our physical and mental well-being, as fundamental to our survival as oxygen, water, or shelter. A new theory of attachment. The clues to the true purpose of our emotional bonds have been visible for centuries, though frequently ignored. Long ago, observers noted that infants in foundling homes, despite being adequately fed and sheltered, would literally wither and die from sadness. During the early 20th century, pediatricians and psychiatrists began to document a tragic phenomenon in hospitals and orphanages. Children deprived of touch and emotional contact were perishing in alarming numbers or developing into emotionally frozen, socially crippled individuals. They suffered from what was termed emotional starvation. It was the brilliant British psychiatrist John Bowlby who ultimately gathered these scattered observations and wove them into a masterful, transformative framework known as attachment theory. Raised in an upper-class British environment where antiseptic distance from children was the norm, Bowlby rebelled against the prevailing psychoanalytic doctrines of his time. while the psychological establishment insisted that a patient's internal fantasies and hidden conflicts were the root of human distress. Bowlby stubbornly argued that real-world interactions with flesh-and-blood caregivers were the true architects of our emotional lives. Working with disturbed, deeply troubled youths in London, he recognized that behind their masks of callous indifference lay a bottomless well of despair. They were paralyzed by the trauma of emotional deprivation, frozen in a defensive posture designed to ensure they would never be hurt again. Following World War II, Bowlby studied orphaned children and concluded that loving contact is as critical to human survival as physical nutrition. Drawing inspiration from Charles Darwin, Bowlby asserted that keeping a precious loved one close is an evolutionary masterstroke, a wired-in survival technique. Naturally, this radical proposition was met with fierce resistance. The conventional wisdom of the era, championed by popular child-rearing experts, insisted that coddling children produced weak, overly dependent adults. Society demanded that parents maintain a sterile, objective distance, even forbidding them from staying with their sick children in hospitals. To prove his theory, Bowlby and his colleagues, notably Mary Ainsworth, turned to rigorous observation. Ainsworth designed a simple but groundbreaking experiment called the strange situation, which monitored how young children reacted when separated from, and subsequently reunited with, their mothers. This experiment beautifully captured the four fundamental behaviors of attachment: the drive to monitor physical and emotional closeness to a loved one, the instinct to reach out to them when unsure or upset, the pain of missing them when apart, and the ability to use their reliable presence as a secure base from which to explore the world. The children who possessed a warm, responsive connection with their mothers could calm themselves during the separation and reconnect joyfully upon return. Those with unpredictable or cold caregivers either became anxious and aggressive or completely detached and numb. Further bolstering this perspective, psychologist Harry Harlow conducted heartbreaking experiments with infant monkeys, proving that when forced to choose between a wire surrogate mother that provided food and a soft cloth surrogate that provided no food but offered tactile comfort, the infants consistently chose the comfort of the cloth. Isolation and emotional deprivation crippled these primates, leaving them profoundly damaged. Slowly but surely, attachment theory overturned the cold child-rearing paradigms of the past, establishing the undeniable truth that children have an absolute requirement for safe, ongoing emotional closeness. Love and adults. John Bowlby firmly believed that the need for secure attachment does not vanish when we outgrow our childhoods. He observed the exact same patterns of separation distress in adults, such as widows grieving the loss of their spouses. The drive for connection, he maintained, shapes our relationships from the cradle to the grave. Yet, once again, the psychological establishment and society at large rejected this notion. The idea that adults require deep emotional dependency clashed violently with the entrenched cultural ideal of maturity, which equated adulthood with rugged individualism and stoic self-sufficiency. We lionize the invulnerable hero who faces down danger completely alone, and we use clinical, pathologizing labels like codependent or fused to describe those who display a strong need for their partners. It was not until shortly before Bowlby's death that researchers began to formally investigate adult romantic love through the lens of attachment. By asking men and women simple questions about their romantic experiences, psychologists discovered that adults exhibit the exact same attachment patterns as mothers and children. When adults feel secure in their romantic bonds, they reach out and connect with ease. When they feel insecure, they either become fiercely anxious, demanding and controlling, or they defensively avoid contact and retreat behind walls of silence. This revelation sparked a tidal wave of research that has fundamentally altered our understanding of adult love. We now possess undeniable evidence that a secure sense of connection with a romantic partner is the greatest source of human strength. When we are comfortably bonded, we are significantly better at seeking support when we are frightened and far more adept at offering it when our partners are in need. We become emotionally resilient. We are less prone to aggressive hostility when conflicts inevitably arise, attributing fewer malicious intentions to the people we love. A safe bond genuinely empowers us. People who feel securely connected actually like themselves more and exhibit greater openness to new information and ambiguous situations. They are deeply curious rather than rigidly defensive. Most paradoxically of all, this research shatters the myth of the self-sufficient warrior. The more securely connected we are to our partners, the more capable we become of stepping out into the world as highly functioning, independent individuals. A wealth of evidence. The scientific community is now delivering a unified, resounding message. We are animals who require a highly specific kind of close connection, and we deny this biological truth at our absolute peril. History shows us that in the darkest circumstances, such as the death camps of the Second World War, survival was almost always achieved in pairs, not by solitary individuals. Today, medical science echoes this truth, demonstrating that emotional isolation is a health risk more lethal than smoking or high blood pressure. Severe loneliness drastically elevates our blood pressure and doubles our risk of heart attacks and strokes. However, it is not simply the presence of another person that protects us. The quality of that relationship is paramount. Toxic, distressed relationships actively break down our physical health. Men enduring hostile marriages suffer significantly more angina episodes, while women in strained partnerships exhibit elevated stress hormones and a depressed immune system. The devastation is so profound that researchers have found the severity of marital discord to be as accurate a predictor of survival in congestive heart failure patients as the actual severity of their medical symptoms. Our romantic relationships regulate our physical bodies. Nasty, contemptuous arguments dramatically elevate cortisol levels and can even slow down the physical healing of wounds. Mental health is equally vulnerable, with marital distress raising the risk of clinical depression tenfold. Conversely, a positive, loving connection is a phenomenal shield against the traumas of life. Supercouples, those deeply and securely bonded to one another, possess nervous systems that are visibly calmed by the mere touch of their partner. Brain imaging studies reveal that when patients are subjected to the threat of physical pain, holding the hand of a securely attached loved one drastically reduces the brain's stress response and lessens the actual sensation of pain. The phrase hurt feelings is not a metaphor. Neurological scans show that emotional exclusion and rejection trigger the exact same regions of the brain that process physical injury. But when we are held close, our brains are bathed in oxytocin and vasopressin, the cuddle hormones, which shut down the panic of cortisol and flood our systems with the serene, rewarding chemistry of dopamine. Love is not the icing on the cake of life. It is the very oxygen that sustains us. Once we fully comprehend and embrace this revolutionary view of love, we can strip away the shame of needing another human being. We can recognize our intense emotions not as irrational flaws, but as the brilliant survival mechanisms they are, paving the way for us to finally reach the heart of enduring connection. Chapter 2. Where did our love go? Losing connection. There is an agonizing mystery that plagues almost every romantic relationship. A creeping shadow that slowly eclipses the bright, effortless joy of early love. In the beginning, we feel invincible. We are exquisitely attuned to our partner, finishing their sentences, anticipating their needs, and feeling completely held in their gaze. Yet, over time, a subtle shift occurs. The warmth gives way to a persistent chill. Conversations that once flowed easily now feel like navigating a field of hidden explosives. We find ourselves asking, with genuine bewilderment and despair, how we managed to become so alien to the person we love most in the world. We tend to blame this erosion on superficial culprits, the exhaustion of raising children, the relentless pressure of our careers, or fundamentally incompatible personality traits. We convince ourselves that our partner has changed, becoming selfish or impossibly critical. However, the true source of this decay is rarely about the mundane details of daily life. The arguments over finances or household chores are merely the smoke. The fire is the terrifying, often unacknowledged loss of our secure emotional connection. When this vital bond begins to fray, we do not merely feel disappointed or frustrated. We experience a primal panic. This is not a metaphor or a poetic exaggeration, but a profound biological reality. Because our brains are wired to view our romantic partners as our ultimate survival mechanism, any perceived threat to that connection triggers an ancient alarm system deep within our mammalian brain. When we sense that our partner is emotionally unavailable, distant, or actively rejecting us, our amygdala, the brain's fear center, sounds an urgent, deafening siren. We are suddenly plunged into the exact same state of physiological terror that an infant experiences when separated from its mother. The world feels completely unsafe. In this state of acute alarm, our rational, thinking brain is hijacked by desperate survival instincts. We cannot step back and calmly analyze the situation because, on a neurological level, we feel as though we are fighting for our very lives. This primal panic dictates exactly how we behave when the relationship feels threatened. We are compelled into one of two automatic survival strategies. We either aggressively demand connection, fighting to force our partner to respond to us, or we defensively shut down, retreating behind a wall of numb indifference to protect ourselves from the agonizing pain of rejection. We do not choose these reactions consciously. They are desperate, reflexive attempts to manage an intolerable vulnerability. Driven by this overwhelming biological fear, lovers inevitably find themselves trapped in the demon dialogues. Because we are reacting from a place of sheer panic rather than rational thought, our attempts to save the relationship actually destroy it. We become locked in rigid, repetitive cycles of interaction that take on a destructive life of their own. One partner, terrified of losing the connection, may criticize, complain, and attack in a frantic bid to get the other's attention. The other partner, feeling overwhelmed and inadequate in the face of this barrage, withdraws, minimizes, and emotionally shuts down to survive the assault. This withdrawal only amplifies the first partner's panic, leading to louder attacks, which in turn causes the second partner to retreat even further into the shadows. These dialogues are a tragic dance of missed signals. Beneath the harsh words and the stony silences, both partners are essentially asking the exact same terrified question. Are you there for me? Do I matter to you? Will you respond when I need you most? But because this question is masked by anger or shrouded in apathy, the partner never hears the desperate plea for love. They only hear the criticism or feel the coldness. Over time, these destructive loops become the central reality of the relationship. The tragedy is that the partners are no longer fighting each other. They are fighting the pattern. The demon dialogues become the true enemy, a suffocating force that drains the oxygen from the room and leaves both individuals starving for affection, convinced that the other simply does not care. To understand how couples descend into this misery, and how they might eventually find their way out, we must examine the key moments of attachment and detachment that define the trajectory of a shared life. A relationship does not shatter all at once. It is dismantled piece by piece through hundreds of seemingly insignificant interactions. These pivotal moments occur when one partner takes an emotional risk, reaching out with a raw vulnerability or a clear need for comfort. If the other partner turns toward them, offering a reassuring touch, an empathetic word, or simply their full, undivided presence, a moment of secure attachment is forged. The bond is fortified, and the world feels safe again. However, if that same bid for connection is met with a dismissive sigh, a sarcastic remark, or a blank stare, a devastating moment of detachment occurs. The reaching partner is left hanging over an emotional abyss. In the landscape of adult love, these moments of failed responsiveness are experienced as profound relational traumas. They leave lasting scars on the nervous system, creating a lingering expectation of abandonment. As these micro-traumas accumulate, the trust that once formed the bedrock of the relationship begins to crumble. The partners stop reaching out, assuming that their vulnerability will only be met with more pain. The space between them widens, the silence deepens, and the relationship quietly slips into a state of chronic starvation, waiting for a conversation that can finally break the cycle and restore the connection. Chapter 3. Emotional Responsiveness. The Key to a Lifetime of Love. When therapeutic practices first began addressing relationship distress, the prevailing wisdom assumed that couples simply lacked the technical skills to negotiate their differences. The clinical focus was heavily placed on teaching rational problem-solving, crafting behavioral contracts, and practicing active listening techniques. Therapists acted much like referees or communication coaches, advising partners to schedule specific times to discuss their grievances and to carefully manage their tone of voice. Yet, beneath the surface of these structured interventions, the profound agony of disconnection remained largely untouched. Couples might learn to argue more politely about household finances or daily chores, but the underlying, terrifying chasm of emotional isolation persisted. It became increasingly clear that logic and behavioral checklists were completely inadequate weapons against the primal panic of a failing bond. The birth of emotionally focused therapy emerged from a radical shift in perspective, a decision to stop treating the symptoms of conflict and instead plunge directly into the raw, pulsating heart of the emotional bond itself. By observing distressed couples not as rational bargainers but as profoundly attached mammals fighting for survival, a new understanding took shape. The relentless criticisms, the icy withdrawals, and the explosive arguments were stripped of their surface meanings. They were no longer viewed as character flaws or communication deficits, but rather as desperate, distorted protests against the loss of secure attachment. The therapeutic process shifted from teaching cognitive skills to orchestrating powerful corrective emotional experiences. It became about helping partners step out of the frantic, reactive loops of their defensive behaviors and guiding them toward expressing their deeper, softer, and more vulnerable longings. This approach recognized that the only force powerful enough to override the terror of disconnection is the visceral, undeniable experience of being emotionally held and understood by the person we love. At the very core of this transformative approach lies a singular, profound concept: emotional responsiveness. This is the bedrock upon which all secure, lasting love is built. To demystify what responsiveness actually looks and feels like in the crucible of a real relationship, it can be broken down into three vital components, forming a fundamental question that every partner unconsciously asks. Are you there for me? The first pillar is accessibility. This asks whether a partner is emotionally present and open, even in the midst of doubt or insecurity. Accessibility requires a willingness to put down the distractions of the modern world, to step away from the relentless demands of daily life, and to truly pay attention. It means that when a partner reaches out, they do not encounter a brick wall of defensiveness or a void of distraction, but rather a receptive, available presence. The second component is responsiveness. This goes beyond mere physical presence to encompass the actual emotional reaction to a partner's reach. When a partner extends a bid for connection, whether it is a subtle sigh of distress, a flicker of anxiety, or a direct plea for comfort, responsiveness dictates that the other will engage with that emotion. It means demonstrating that a partner's needs and fears matter, that they resonate on a deep level, and that they will be met with comforting action rather than dismissal, minimization, or analytical problem-solving. It is the crucial act of tuning into the emotional frequency of the other person and sending a clear, undeniable signal of care in return. The final element is engagement. Engagement is a special kind of deep, captivated attention. It is the look in a partner's eyes that communicates absolute priority. It involves a deliberate, active participation in the relationship, a mutual exchange of energy and affection that makes both individuals feel uniquely valued and securely anchored. When a relationship is saturated with these three elements, accessibility, responsiveness, and engagement, the bond becomes an impenetrable fortress against the inevitable storms of life. To cultivate this profound level of emotional responsiveness, it is necessary to navigate a series of distinct, transformative experiences. These are not mere intellectual discussions, but deep, structural shifts in how partners relate to one another. The journey unfolds through 7 pivotal conversations, each designed to dismantle the destructive patterns of the past and build a new architecture of secure connection. The process begins with the critical task of recognizing the destructive dances that hijack the relationship, bringing the hidden patterns of conflict out of the shadows and identifying them as the true enemy. Once the battleground is understood, the focus shifts inward to finding the tender, vulnerable areas, the hidden sensitivities that trigger the deepest panics. With this new awareness, partners learn to revisit their most damaging, rocky moments, not to relitigate the facts, but to heal the underlying emotional injuries with newfound empathy. As the defensive walls crumble, the relationship moves toward the core experience of explicitly asking for and receiving the deep emotional reassurance that has been starving. This opens the door to the profoundly difficult but necessary work of forgiving past betrayals and injuries, clearing the toxic residue that blocks true intimacy. The physical dimension of the relationship is then transformed, shifting from a source of anxiety or routine into a profound mechanism for bonding through touch and closeness. Finally, the journey culminates in deliberate strategies to keep the love alive, ensuring that the newly forged connection is actively nurtured and protected against the inevitable erosions of time. Understanding the mechanics of love intellectually is only the preamble to the actual work of transformation. The transition from theoretical knowledge to a lived, breathing reality requires active, courageous participation. It demands that both individuals step into the arena of their own relationship, armed with this new understanding, and begin to gently probe the edges of their habitual patterns. It requires a willingness to observe oneself and one's partner with profound curiosity rather than rigid judgment. This is the moment to begin tracing the contours of the daily interactions, to notice when the heart rate accelerates, when the urge to defend or retreat flares up, and to recognize these physiological responses for what they truly are, the ancient, wired-in panic of a threatened bond. By actively engaging in this deeply personal exploration, lovers can begin the delicate, life-altering process of reshaping their shared emotional world, preparing themselves to step fully into the profound conversations that await. Conversation 2. Finding the raw spots. Once the destructive cycles of the demon dialogues have been clearly identified, a crucial realization emerges. Recognizing the pattern is only the perimeter of the battlefield. To truly dismantle these cycles, we must venture deeper into the emotional terrain and uncover the hidden vulnerabilities that ignite these fierce reactions in the first place. These hidden vulnerabilities are our raw spots. A raw spot is a profound hypersensitivity, an emotional bruise that has not fully healed, typically originating from past relationships or early childhood experiences where our fundamental need for secure attachment was either ignored, dismissed, or actively violated. When we enter into a new romantic bond, we do not arrive as blank slates. We bring the accumulated history of our past emotional starvations with us. These tender areas lie dormant beneath the surface of our daily interactions, waiting for a misplaced word, a specific tone of voice, or a fleeting look of disapproval to strike them. When a partner inadvertently brushes against one of these hidden bruises, the reaction is never proportional to the immediate event. The present moment is suddenly hijacked by the unresolved terror of the past. Understanding the precise moment when one of these tender areas has been struck is an essential skill in reclaiming the security of the relationship. The most glaring indicator that a raw spot has been rubbed is a radical, instantaneous shift in the emotional atmosphere. A conversation that was seemingly benign or mildly frustrating suddenly detonates into overwhelming panic, fiery rage, or a profound, icy withdrawal. If a partner's reaction appears completely out of scale with the topic at hand, if a minor disagreement about being 5 minutes late to a dinner suddenly spirals into an existential accusation of total abandonment or fundamental unworthiness, a raw spot has undoubtedly been hit. In these moments, the physical body sounds a deafening alarm. The heart races, the stomach tightens, and the mind is flooded with a terrifying certainty that the secure bond is rupturing. The partner whose raw spot has been triggered is no longer reacting to the present inconvenience. They are fighting off the ghosts of every past betrayal, every moment they were left to face the darkness entirely alone. Because this reaction is deeply rooted in primal survival instincts, the immediate impulse is almost always defensive, to strike out in anger or to retreat into silence. To navigate this treacherous landscape, it is necessary to embark on a deliberate, courageous process of internal mapping and mutual disclosure. The initial phase of this vital work requires turning the gaze inward to identify the specific contours of these sensitivities. This is an exercise in profound self-observation. It involves stepping back from the heat of the argument and asking oneself what specific feeling was triggered precisely before the defensive armor went up. Was it a sudden, crushing sense of being invisible? Was it the terrifying flash of feeling completely inadequate and bound to disappoint? Or was it the familiar, sickening dread of impending abandonment? Pinpointing the exact nature of the emotional wound beneath the superficial anger or numbness is the first step in disarming its explosive power. It requires stripping away the immediate urge to blame the partner for the pain and acknowledging the fragility that existed long before the current conflict began. Once the specific nature of the sensitivity has been named, the journey continues backward in time to locate the origin of the wound. These deep-seated fears do not materialize out of thin air. They are forged in the fires of past experiences. Tracing the raw spot to its source might mean returning to the memory of a highly critical parent who could never be satisfied. Or it might involve revisiting the devastation of a previous romantic relationship that ended in sudden, inexplicable betrayal. By connecting the present panic to its historical root, the overwhelming emotion is contextualized. It ceases to be an uncontrollable, irrational monster and becomes a perfectly logical, albeit outdated, survival response. This historical perspective allows an individual to recognize that while their partner may have accidentally stepped on the tripwire, the explosive device itself was planted long ago. The culmination of this profound internal work is the act of bringing this newfound awareness directly into the shared space of the relationship. The final and most transformative step is to share these hidden vulnerabilities with the partner, not as an accusation, but as an act of profound trust. Instead of attacking the partner for causing the pain, the individual learns to say, in essence, that they are hurting because an old, familiar fear has been awakened. Communicating this raw, unvarnished truth completely alters the trajectory of the interaction. When a partner is finally allowed to see the fragile, terrified reality beneath the armor of anger or withdrawal, their own defensive instincts begin to soften. The dynamic shifts instantly from a hostile confrontation between two adversaries into a collaborative effort to soothe a shared injury. By illuminating the dark corners where these raw spots reside, couples transform their deepest insecurities into the very foundation of a more profound, unshakable connection. Conversation 3. Revisiting a rocky moment. The territory of intimate relationships is inevitably scarred by moments of deep misunderstanding, sudden ruptures, and agonizing conflict. Even the most devoted partners will, at times, fail to catch each other's emotional cues, leading to clashes that leave lasting, painful bruises on the bond. The instinct, once the immediate fire of the argument has burned out, is almost always to bury the incident. We desperately hope that sweeping the painful memory under the rug of daily routine will allow it to fade. We rely on time, or perhaps a cautious, unspoken truce, to mend the damage. Yet, unexamined emotional injuries do not simply evaporate. They calcify. They become hidden landmines in the landscape of the relationship, guaranteed to detonate the next time a similar pressure is applied. To build a truly secure and resilient connection, it is absolutely essential to return to the scene of the crash. Partners must find the courage to revisit these rocky moments, not to relitigate the facts of the dispute or to finally prove who was right, but to unravel the emotional knot and heal the lingering tear in their attachment. The fundamental objective of returning to a painful memory is de-escalating disconnection. When partners try to discuss a past argument, the immense danger is that they will instantly become entangled in the exact same destructive cycle that caused the injury in the first place. The heart rate accelerates, the defensive walls slam back into position, and the original panic is resurrected. To prevent this, a profound shift in perspective is required. The couple must deliberately step out of the content of the argument, the forgotten anniversary, the sharp tone of voice, the misunderstood text message, and focus entirely on the emotional process that unfolded between them. They must learn to look at the conflict from a balcony, observing the mechanics of their shared distress. By stepping back, they can begin to map the precise sequence of their disconnection, identifying the specific triggers and the automatic fear-driven responses that fueled the fire. This shared observation fundamentally changes the dynamic. Instead of two adversaries locked in a battle for emotional survival, they become a team of investigators, collaboratively analyzing the dangerous undertow that temporarily swept them away from each other. They acknowledge the powerful hostile cycle as the true enemy, explicitly stating that they were both caught in a trap that neither of them desired. As partners safely map the sequence of their past conflict, a crucial revelation must occur: recognizing your impact on your partner. In the blinding heat of an argument, when primal panic takes over, we almost universally feel powerless. We feel victimized, desperately trying to defend ourselves against what feels like an overwhelming assault or a devastating abandonment. From this vantage point of perceived weakness, it is nearly impossible to imagine that we hold any power at all. Yet, in the delicate ecosystem of romantic attachment, each partner wields an extraordinary, almost terrifying influence over the other's emotional equilibrium. To heal a rocky moment, one must step outside their own defensive shell and acknowledge the profound weight of their own actions. A heavy sigh, a roll of the eyes, a sudden shift in posture, or a retreat into stony silence. These are not neutral events. To the partner whose attachment system is on high alert, these subtle movements are interpreted as massive existential threats to the bond. Realizing that you are not a helpless victim, but a powerful figure capable of triggering deep terror in the person you love, is a deeply sobering but ultimately liberating discovery. It shifts the narrative from blame to shared responsibility. This realization naturally paves the way for the next vital step, which involves recognizing how fear drives your partner. When we view a past conflict through the lens of our own hurt, our partner's behavior appears malicious, deliberately cruel, or inexplicably cold. We see the sharp edges of their anger or the impenetrable ice of their withdrawal. But when we look closer, guided by the principles of attachment, we can begin to see beneath this formidable armor. The aggressive demands and the chilling silences are stripped of their menacing intent and revealed for what they truly are: desperate, frantic attempts to cope with the agonizing fear of losing the connection. When a partner can look at the memory of a fierce argument and see that the other person was not attacking out of hatred, but lashing out because they were utterly terrified of being abandoned or found unworthy, the entire emotional landscape shifts. The offense is transformed into a plea for reassurance. This profound empathy allows the injured partner to absorb the other's behavior not as a personal failure, but as a tragic, misguided survival strategy. The deliberate application of these insights transforms philosophical understanding into lived, relational reality. This active engagement is where the actual repair of the nervous system takes place. Reconstructing a difficult memory requires partners to walk through the narrative of the painful event together, slowly and with immense care. It involves holding space for each other's vulnerability without rushing to fix the problem or defend one's own actions. One partner might cautiously explain how a specific moment triggered a sudden freezing panic, while the other listens intently, validating that fear rather than arguing against it. They practice naming their own emotional realities and gently receiving the emotional realities of their partner. This careful, structured dialogue acts as an emotional suture. By successfully navigating the memory of the trauma without falling back into the destructive cycle, the couple overwrites the narrative of pain with a new experience of safety and mutual understanding. They prove to each other that even when they stumble and fall into the darkness of disconnection, they now possess the map and the shared commitment to find their way back into the light, forging a bond that is stronger and more resilient precisely because it has been tested and actively repaired. Conversation. 4. Hold me tight, engaging and connecting. The preceding steps in this journey have been an essential preparation, a clearing of the dense, tangled brush that has choked the relationship. By recognizing the destructive cycles, unearthing the raw, tender bruises of the past, and bravely returning to the site of previous emotional collisions, a couple successfully halts the hemorrhaging of their bond. They establish a crucial baseline of safety and de-escalate the primal panic that once governed their interactions. Yet, simply stopping the bleeding is not the same as cultivating a thriving, resilient life together. To truly transform the relationship, the partners must step beyond damage control and enter the profoundly vulnerable, active phase of building a secure connection. This is the crucible of intimacy. This is the moment where the defensive armor is completely discarded and both individuals step out of the shadows to ask for exactly what they need to feel safe, loved, and securely anchored in the world. This profound architectural shift in the relationship is the very heart of the healing process. For this transformation to occur, the established roles that partners have played in their destructive dances must be completely rewritten. The individual who has historically retreated into silence and numbness must now step forward into the light. This requires immense courage, as it means claiming their rightful space within the relationship and actively expressing their emotional realities, rather than retreating to protect themselves from perceived failure. They must transition from a posture of defensive evasion to one of open, accessible presence. Conversely, the partner who has historically pursued connection through sharp criticism, frantic demands, or relentless questioning must undergo a radical softening. They must relinquish the illusion of control that anger provides and learn to express their profound longing for connection from a place of naked vulnerability. Instead of protesting the distance with a weapon in hand, they must learn to reach out with an open, trembling palm. When a demand is transformed into a pure, unvarnished expression of need, it ceases to be an attack. It becomes a powerful magnetic invitation that almost biologically compels the other partner to move closer in comfort rather than pull away in self-defense. To achieve this level of profound, unguarded communication, one must cross the most terrifying threshold of the human heart. Before an individual can clearly articulate their deepest need for connection, they are forced to confront the dark, paralyzing shadows that block their path. They must look inward and directly address the paralyzing question of what they are most afraid of. This is not an intellectual exercise. It is an exploration of the absolute bedrock of mammalian survival, terror. For some, the ultimate dread is the prospect of total abandonment, the sickening conviction that they will be left utterly alone, cast out into a cold, indifferent world with no one to anchor them. This fear often masquerades as fierce independence or clinging desperation, but at its core, it is the panic of the isolated infant. For others, the deepest terror is rooted in an overwhelming sense of inadequacy and unlovability. This is the haunting, pervasive belief that if they were to truly strip away all their defenses, achievements, and carefully constructed personas, if their partner were to see them in their absolute, unvarnished truth, they would be found fundamentally flawed, disappointing, and ultimately unworthy of affection. This fear breeds a profound shame, compelling the individual to hide, minimize their needs, or constantly strive for an impossible perfection to justify their place in the relationship. Standing on the precipice of these existential fears feels counterintuitive to every biological survival instinct we possess. The brain's fear center screams that exposing these profound vulnerabilities to another human being, especially the one person who holds the power to inflict the most devastating emotional injury, is an act of reckless self-destruction. The natural impulse is to deflect, to mask the terror with anger, or to bury it beneath a thick layer of stoic indifference. Yet, the central paradox of human love is that impenetrable safety can only be achieved through total, undefended exposure. When an individual finds the profound courage to look into the eyes of their beloved and articulate these hidden terrors, when they can say with a soft and trembling voice that they are paralyzed by the fear of not being enough, or that they are consumed by the dread of being left behind, the fundamental chemistry of the relationship is irrevocably altered. The hidden monsters that once fueled the relentless, exhausting cycles of conflict are finally dragged out of the darkness and exposed to the light of shared consciousness. In this space of shared vulnerability, the fear ceases to be a solitary prison sentence. It becomes a shared human burden. By voicing the unspeakable dread, and by having that dread met not with judgment or withdrawal, but with the warm, responsive presence of a partner who reaches back and offers a secure hold, the ancient wounds of attachment begin to permanently heal. This is the exact moment the fortress of isolation crumbles, replaced by the unbreakable sanctuary of a truly secure bond. Conversation 5. Forgiving injuries. In the intricate architecture of a lifelong bond, even the most devoted partners will occasionally stumble and fail one another. Minor misunderstandings and daily frictions are inevitable, and as a relationship strengthens, these small tears are routinely repaired. However, there is a distinctly different, far more devastating type of relational wound that cannot be easily mended by a simple apology or the passage of time. These are deep attachment injuries. They occur in moments of extreme vulnerability, perhaps during a health crisis, the loss of a loved one, or the overwhelming transition into parenthood, when one partner reaches out in desperate, urgent need and the other utterly fails to respond. This failure is not experienced merely as a disappointment. It is registered by the brain and the body as a profound betrayal, a life-threatening abandonment precisely when the safety of the bond was needed most. The fundamental covenant of the relationship, the implicit promise that "I will be there for you when you need me," is suddenly and catastrophically broken. When an attachment injury occurs, the wounded partner is plunged into a state of chronic, agonizing hypervigilance. The trauma of the betrayal shatters their foundational sense of safety, leaving them unable to trust the emotional ground beneath their feet. In a desperate attempt to protect themselves from experiencing such devastating abandonment again, they construct massive defensive walls. Yet because the primal need for connection remains, this self-protection frequently manifests as relentless anger, sharp accusations, and an endless rehashing of the painful event. The offending partner, who may feel profound guilt or deep bewilderment about their past failure, often reacts to this barrage by retreating into defensiveness, minimizing the event, or pleading for the injured partner to simply let it go and move on. This defensive withdrawal is the exact opposite of what the injured partner requires, as it only serves to confirm their deepest fear, that the offending partner is truly unavailable and the bond is fundamentally unsafe. The couple becomes paralyzed, trapped in a frozen landscape where the ghost of the past injury constantly haunts their present interactions, blocking any genuine path to intimacy. To thaw this frozen ground and actually heal the fractured bond, the couple must engage in a deeply structured, courageous process of repair. True forgiveness in an intimate relationship is not an intellectual decision, nor is it a divine act of grace that suddenly descends from above. It is an active, arduous emotional journey. The path to genuine resolution requires navigating 6 essential steps, transforming the traumatic memory from a source of endless division into a powerful testament to the relationship's resilience. The journey must begin with the injured partner articulating the pain of the betrayal as plainly and openly as possible, stripping away the armor of anger and blame. They must find the courage to describe the exact moment of abandonment and the profound terror, helplessness, and grief that accompanied it. They must speak from the center of the wound, rather than firing arrows from the fortress walls. As this raw pain is spoken, the offending partner faces the immense challenge of remaining completely present. They must actively resist the overwhelming urge to defend their past actions, to explain their intentions, or to correct the facts of the narrative. Their sole task is to listen deeply, to absorb the magnitude of their partner's suffering, and to verbally acknowledge the reality of the pain without any caveats or justifications. This requires a profound suspension of ego, allowing the injured partner's emotional reality to be the absolute center of gravity in the room. Once the pain has been fully heard and validated, the offending partner must take absolute, unequivocal ownership of the injury. This goes far beyond a superficial, "I am sorry." It requires a deep, emotional engagement where the offending partner expresses genuine remorse and clearly articulates their understanding of exactly how their failure impacted the person they love. They must show, through their tone, their eyes, and their posture, that they are truly horrified by the pain they caused, and that they comprehend the severity of the broken trust. This profound acknowledgement acts as a powerful soothing balm on the injured partner's nervous system. As the defensive panic begins to subside, the injured partner can finally move to the next vital stage, asking for the comfort and reassurance that was desperately missing during the original trauma. They must explicitly voice what they needed then and what they need right now to feel safe again. The offending partner is then presented with the opportunity to reach back. They must respond to this new, vulnerable request by offering the deep emotional presence, the comforting touch, and the steadfast reassurance that they previously failed to provide. By stepping in and holding the injured partner close in the present moment, they provide a powerful, corrective emotional experience that begins to overwrite the painful memory of the past abandonment. Finally, having successfully navigated the treacherous waters of the injury, the couple must work together to construct a new, integrated narrative of the event. The betrayal is not erased from their history, but its meaning is fundamentally transformed. It is no longer a story of permanent abandonment, but a story of human frailty, profound repair, and mutual dedication. The scar remains, but it no longer throbs with pain. Instead, it serves as a permanent, visible reminder of their shared capacity to survive the darkness and find their way back to one another. Engaging in the practical application of these steps is the most demanding work a couple can undertake. It requires immense patience and the understanding that true forgiveness is rarely achieved in a single conversation. Healing a profound attachment injury is an iterative process. The fear and the hurt will inevitably resurface, and the couple must be prepared to patiently walk through the steps of acknowledgement, ownership, and comfort time and time again. By deliberately practicing this deep emotional engagement, partners slowly rebuild the shattered foundation of their trust. They learn to tolerate the discomfort of vulnerability and prove to one another through consistent, responsive action that the relationship is once again a safe haven, capable of holding both their greatest fears and their deepest love. Conversation 6. Bonding through sex and touch. In the early days of a relationship, passion is effortless. Every shared glance, every fleeting touch vibrates with an undeniable electric current. This is biology's brilliant strategy for drawing two people together. Yet as the initial intoxicating rush begins to settle, a profound question emerges regarding the true place of physical intimacy in a lasting bond. Beyond the initial magnetic pull, can the physical connection actively sustain and deepen a lifelong partnership? The answer is a resounding yes. A fulfilling physical connection is a profoundly potent bonding experience. The fiery infatuation of early romance is merely the prelude. A deeply attuned physical intimacy in a committed relationship is the main event. However, cultural conditioning often obscures this truth. Society, bolstered by a chorus of relationship advice, frequently portrays passion as a transient sensation destined to fade, suggesting that thrilling romance must inevitably degrade into a comfortable but passionless friendship. Furthermore, the physical act itself is often reduced to a mechanical pursuit of immediate gratification. The focus shifts entirely to techniques, positions, and the mechanics of physical release, treating the act as an end in itself. In reality, a secure emotional bond and a deeply satisfying physical relationship are inextricably linked. They continually cue and enhance one another. A profound emotional connection naturally translates into an extraordinary physical connection, and that physical closeness, in turn, deepens the emotional safety. When partners are emotionally accessible, responsive, and engaged, the bedroom becomes a space of intimate play and safe adventure. Secure partners feel an immense freedom to surrender to sensation, to explore their deepest desires, and to openly share their most profound joys and vulnerabilities. In this space, the physical act truly becomes an expression of love. When a relationship falters, the physical connection is almost always the first casualty. It acts as the canary in the coal mine. A dwindling physical life is rarely the root problem. Rather, it is the immediate symptom of a failing emotional connection. When partners no longer feel safe with one another, desire wanes. This leads to less physical intimacy, which generates hurt feelings and a heightened sense of rejection, further loosening the emotional bond. The equation is stark. Without a safe emotional bond, physical intimacy evaporates. Without physical intimacy, the bond starves. Because we are wired for face-to-face affection, where the most vulnerable parts of ourselves are entirely exposed, it is biologically impossible to feel truly wary or afraid and simultaneously experience profound desire. The safety of our emotional connection dictates the quality of our physical connection. Depending on how comfortable we are with closeness and our own needs, our approach to physical intimacy falls into 3 distinct patterns. Sealed-off sex. In this pattern, the sole objective is to reduce physical tension and achieve a sense of performance or prowess. This approach is typical of individuals who have either never learned to trust or who currently feel profoundly unsafe with their partner. The entire focus narrows to sensation and technique, rendering the emotional bond entirely secondary. In the context of a loving relationship, this impersonal approach becomes highly toxic. The partner on the receiving end often feels objectified and used rather than cherished as a unique individual. When a partner shuts down emotionally, usually because they are terrified of true closeness or have been deeply wounded in the past, they retreat into physical mechanics. They might initiate brief encounters, but actively hold back from actions that invite real emotional engagement, such as lingering kisses or prolonged caressing. Emotional connection, the true gateway to profound eroticism, is deliberately kept shut. This emotional disengagement starves the relationship of its richer dimensions. While there may be temporary excitement, the passion is inherently short-lived and one-dimensional. To maintain the thrill, the individual must constantly seek novel sensations or techniques, trapping them in an endless, exhausting pursuit of mere physical stimulation. Solace sex. This pattern emerges when physical intimacy is used primarily as a desperate plea for reassurance. The physical act becomes merely a vehicle to alleviate overwhelming attachment fears. While there is more emotional involvement here than in a sealed-off dynamic, the dominant emotion orchestrating the encounter is pure anxiety. When an individual is terrified of losing their partner or feeling inadequate, they may obsessively pursue physical closeness, often preferring cuddling and affection to intercourse itself, as a test of their partner's devotion. If the partner responds, the anxiety temporarily subsides. If they decline, it triggers a catastrophic sense of rejection and panic. When intimacy becomes nothing more than an anti-anxiety medication, it loses its true erotic power. While this dynamic might stabilize a shaky relationship for a short time, it inevitably feeds into the destructive, negative cycles of the demon dialogues. The partner seeking solace becomes demanding and obsessive, which typically overwhelms and turns off the other partner, driving them further apart. The physical connection collapses under the crushing weight of unmet emotional needs. Often this dynamic arises when the most fundamental building block of a bond, regular, safe, and comforting touch, is completely absent from the relationship. When partners no longer hold hands, stroke a shoulder, or embrace, the relationship is in serious peril. Our skin is our largest sense organ, and tender caressing is the royal road to a loving connection. Touch simultaneously arouses and soothes. It is the ultimate language of attachment. When partners try to funnel all their profound needs for comfort and recognition strictly into the bedroom, the physical relationship shatters. Synchrony. Sex. This is the pinnacle of physical and emotional connection, where emotional openness, tender touch, and erotic exploration merge flawlessly. When partners possess a secure emotional connection, their physical intimacy retains all the vibrant ardor of their initial infatuation and expands far beyond it. Secure lovers can fluidly transition from tender playfulness to fiery passion. They can focus on intense physical release one moment, and in the next, journey into profound, lingering affection. Synchrony requires a deep attunement. Secure lovers intuitively sense each other's inner states and respond to subtle shifts in arousal and emotion. This is a physiological resonance, a neural duet where the movements, sighs, and rhythms of one partner perfectly match the other. This synchrony generates a tacit, unbreakable rapport. Because emotional safety eliminates the fear of rejection, connected partners can openly reveal their deepest desires and vulnerabilities. They can laugh at themselves, discuss what brings them pleasure without embarrassment, and experiment freely. They do not need to rely on the constant, superficial novelty of early infatuation, because the true excitement stems from the profound risk of staying entirely open and present with each other in the here and now. With this complete emotional presence, every encounter becomes a safe, thrilling adventure. Resolving sexual problems. The most common physical difficulties in relationships, such as waning desire or performance anxieties, are rarely isolated medical or technical issues. They are almost always the direct result of partners being trapped in cycles of emotional disconnection. When women feel alone and unheard, they typically shut down physically or push frantically for reassurance. When men feel criticized or inadequate, they retreat into performance-driven encounters or experience physical difficulties. However, when a couple actively works to repair their emotional bond, their physical relationship almost automatically resurrects itself. As they learn to tune in to each other's emotional frequencies, the bedroom transforms back into a sanctuary. When a partner can openly confess their insecurities without facing judgment, the fear dissipates. They can work together, applying empathy and humor to navigate the inevitable physical missteps or fading desires that accompany long-term relationships, illnesses, or the sheer exhaustion of daily life. The ultimate manual for a breathtaking physical connection is not a catalog of techniques, but the profound ability to create emotional closeness and move in perfect synchrony. Play and practice on your own. Reflect deeply on your own experiences of physical intimacy. What emotions arise when you consider your current physical connection? Whether it is a sensation of warmth or a sharp pang of frustration, what does this tell you about your sense of safety? Consider your habitual style. Do you generally feel emotionally safe and connected in bed? Or do you find yourself slipping into patterns of sealing off your emotions or desperately seeking solace? Identify your most profound expectations for physical closeness. Often, our deepest longing is not for the act itself, but for the tender holding and caressing that follows. Ask yourself when you feel most unsure or uncomfortable, and conversely, when you feel the most profoundly close to your partner. If it feels impossible to share these reflections directly, consider exploring why the act of sharing itself feels so dangerous. With your partner. Acknowledge together that no physical relationship is flawless and that a certain percentage of encounters will naturally falter. Discuss how you want to handle these moments when the physical or emotional connection misses the mark. How can your partner support you in these vulnerable instances? Share the story of a time in your relationship when the physical connection was incredibly satisfying and deeply resonant. Describe it in vivid detail, focusing on what made it so emotionally powerful. Discuss the multitude of ways physical intimacy can manifest in your lives, as a playful escape, a profound comfort, a burst of wild passion, or a quiet, tender reassurance. Finally, consider a risk you would like to take together in this safe space, knowing that a secure relationship is the ultimate springboard for the most adventurous and fulfilling encounters. Conversation 7. Keeping your love alive. When a couple successfully navigates the turbulent waters of disconnection and forges a secure, emotionally responsive bond, a profound question inevitably arises. Can this newfound harmony actually last? Cynics and disillusioned observers frequently argue that love has a predictable expiration date, that the intoxicating closeness achieved through vulnerability will ultimately decay back into the familiar, exhausting routines of conflict and isolation. They believe that emotional decay is simply the natural trajectory of long-term relationships. However, the reality of adult attachment defies this bleak perspective. While it is true that all things in life are subject to change and flux, a secure emotional bond is not a fragile, temporary state destined to evaporate. When lovers actively learn the language of attachment, when they consistently engage in the deliberate practices of being accessible, responsive, and engaged, they do not merely experience a fleeting high, they build a resilient fortress, but a fortress must be maintained. The profound gains achieved by dismantling destructive cycles and soothing ancient raw spots require deliberate, ongoing care. Love is a living, breathing entity. If it is neglected, it will naturally begin to wither. In a modern world saturated with relentless demands and endless distractions, preserving intimacy requires a conscious, mindful commitment. This final phase of the journey provides the architectural blueprint for sustaining that connection, ensuring that the love you have so painstakingly rebuilt continues to flourish and deepen as the years unfold. Danger point detours. The first crucial practice in sustaining a secure bond involves mapping the treacherous terrain where the relationship has historically faltered. Even in the most connected partnerships, there will be moments when the ground shakes, when old attachment fears flare up and threaten to drag the couple back into their familiar, destructive dances. To prevent these localized tremors from becoming full-scale earthquakes, partners must proactively identify their specific danger points. This requires a mutual, clear-eyed recognition of the subtle cues. A sudden withdrawal, a sharp tone, a missed opportunity for comfort that typically trigger a downward spiral. By openly acknowledging these triggers before they detonate, a couple can collaboratively design detours. They can agree on specific, reassuring phrases or actions that serve as immediate emergency brakes when anxiety begins to mount. When one partner feels the terrifying chill of distance, they no longer have to resort to frantic demands or icy retreat. They can simply ask for the specific reassurance they need, and the other partner can respond with the prearranged comfort that halts the panic before it takes root. Celebrating moments of connection. In the daily rush of existence, it is remarkably easy to overlook the quiet, profound moments of grace that bind two people together. To keep love vibrant, it is essential to deliberately elevate and celebrate these instances of secure connection. This practice is not about grand, sweeping romantic gestures. It is about acknowledging the profound weight of a reassuring glance, a lingering touch, or a soft word of encouragement precisely when it was needed most. Partners must explicitly share with one another how these small actions fortify their sense of belonging. By bringing these positive experiences out of the shadows and into the spoken narrative of the relationship, couples reinforce the undeniable reality of their bond. These shared memories of attunement become a reservoir of strength, reminding both individuals of the profound, positive impact they have on one another's emotional equilibrium. They serve as a luminous counterweight to the inevitable shadows of doubt, confirming that the relationship is, in fact, a sanctuary. Marking moments of separation and reunion with rituals. Throughout human history, rituals have served to anchor individuals within their communities and affirm their deepest values. In the intimate community of a marriage or partnership, rituals are equally vital. Because the moments of parting and coming together are inherently sensitive triggers for our primal attachment system, they must be handled with deliberate care. A relationship left entirely to the chaotic whims of daily schedules will inevitably suffer from emotional starvation. Couples must carve out intentional, repeated ceremonies that clearly signal their commitment and mutual priority. These can be as simple as a mindful, undivided embrace before leaving for work, or a dedicated, uninterrupted 10 minutes of conversation upon returning home. These rituals are not obligations. They are essential structural supports. They provide a predictable physical reassurance that the bond remains intact despite physical separation, effectively insulating the relationship from the erosive forces of a demanding world. Safety first. A common and destructive myth in modern relationships is the belief that lovers must master complex problem-solving and negotiation skills before they can achieve intimacy. The attachment perspective reveals the exact opposite. Emotional safety must be the precursor to resolving practical disputes. When couples attempt to negotiate fraught issues, whether regarding finances, parenting styles, or career decisions, while their underlying attachment needs remain unmet, the pragmatic discussion instantly morphs into a battleground for emotional survival. The true subject of the argument ceases to be the bank account and becomes a desperate plea for recognition and respect. To keep love alive, couples must adopt a strict safety-first protocol. Before addressing the logistical complexities of a disagreement, they must first attend to the emotional music playing beneath the words. By explicitly reassuring each other of their underlying commitment and acknowledging the vulnerability the conflict provokes, they neutralize the primal panic. Once the emotional atmosphere is safe, previously intractable problems shrink into manageable logistical puzzles that can be solved with newfound flexibility and cooperative grace. Creating a resilient relationship story. Human beings are fundamentally narrative creatures. We use stories to organize our experiences, construct our identities, and navigate our futures. When a relationship is consumed by conflict, the shared story becomes chaotic, fragmented, and overwhelmingly negative. To solidify a secure bond, a couple must deliberately author a new integrated narrative of their journey. This resilient relationship story must honestly recount the darkest valleys, the specific ways they historically triggered each other's terrors and retreated into isolation. But crucially, it must also vividly detail their triumphant ascent out of those valleys. It is a story of how they learned to recognize their destructive dances, soothe their deepest raw spots, and courageously reach for one another in moments of profound vulnerability. By weaving their failures and their hard-won repairs into a cohesive narrative, the couple establishes a permanent, shared memory of their resilience. This story becomes their ultimate defense against future despair, proving that even when they lose their way, they possess the shared wisdom to find the path back home. Creating a future love story. With the ghosts of the past successfully integrated into a story of resilience, partners are finally free to cast their gaze forward. A truly secure emotional bond acts as an unparalleled launching pad for personal growth and shared adventure. In this phase, partners are invited to articulate their most profound aspirations for the coming years, both as individuals and as a united front. This process involves sharing personal dreams that previously felt too risky to vocalize and requesting the specific emotional support required to achieve them. It also requires envisioning the desired trajectory of the relationship itself, how they wish to deepen their intimacy, expand their shared experiences, and continually renew their commitment. By explicitly stating these hopes and pledging mutual support, The couple transforms a passive expectation of survival into an active, dynamic project of lifelong exploration. Holding on to positive changes, creating new models. The ultimate objective of this continuous, deliberate practice is nothing less than the neurological remodeling of the brain. When we consistently replace the terrifying panic of isolation with the deeply soothing experience of emotional responsiveness, we literally rewire our internal expectations of love. The outdated, fear-based models, the internalized beliefs that we are fundamentally unlovable or that others will inevitably abandon us, are slowly overwritten by undeniable lived experiences of security and care. This transformation does not happen overnight. It requires the relentless repetition of reaching out, risking exposure, and receiving the warm, holding presence of a beloved partner. As these new neural pathways are forged, trust ceases to be a fragile, conscious effort and becomes an ingrained, automatic reflex. The relationship is permanently established as a secure base, allowing both individuals to step out into the world with profound confidence, knowing unequivocally that whenever they fall, they will be caught. The power of hold me tight, healing traumatic wounds. The power of love. The human experience is inevitably touched by adversity, but certain events shatter the very foundation of our existence. Trauma, whether born from the battlefield, a catastrophic accident, a sudden loss, or the dark corners of childhood abuse, leaves a profound and lasting imprint on the human soul. For decades, the psychological and medical communities treated traumatic stress as an individual pathology, an isolated mechanical breakdown of a person's nervous system that needed to be repaired in the sterile environment of a clinical office. The prevailing belief was that survivors needed to independently process their horrifying memories, desensitize their reactions, and rebuild their shattered psyches alone. However, a revolutionary understanding of trauma is now emerging, one that aligns perfectly with the science of adult attachment. We now recognize that trauma is not merely a memory problem or a chemical imbalance. It is, at its absolute core, a crisis of connection. When the world suddenly becomes dangerous, chaotic, and overwhelmingly cruel, the natural mammalian instinct is to flee to a safe haven. We are biologically wired to seek the protective embrace of another human being when faced with existential threat. But trauma fundamentally ruptures our ability to trust that safe haven. It teaches the nervous system a devastating lesson, that the world is relentlessly hostile, that we are utterly powerless, and, most tragically, that no one will come to our rescue. As a result, the trauma survivor is cast into a state of profound emotional exile. They are left to carry the crushing weight of their terror in absolute isolation, convinced that their internal landscape is far too dark and damaged for anyone else to understand or endure. This is where the profound power of a secure romantic bond reveals itself. Love is not simply a comforting presence in the aftermath of tragedy. It is the ultimate psychological antidote to the devastating isolation of trauma. The emotional responsiveness cultivated in a secure relationship acts as a powerful healing balm, uniquely capable of reaching into the frozen, terrified spaces of a traumatized mind. When a survivor is held safely by an emotionally engaged partner, the brain's alarm systems are literally dampened. The visceral, undeniable experience of being physically and emotionally anchored by a loved one counteracts the traumatic lesson of helplessness. It proves to the nervous system, in a language older and deeper than conscious thought, that the survivor is no longer alone in the dark. Trauma's echoes. The challenge, however, is that the echoes of trauma actively wage war against the very connection the survivor desperately needs. A traumatized nervous system is permanently set to high alert, constantly scanning the horizon for the next disaster. This hypervigilance inevitably bleeds into the romantic relationship. Ordinary moments of daily friction are suddenly amplified into life or death threats. A partner's brief distraction might trigger the terrifying memory of being abandoned during a crisis. A sudden, loud argument might resurrect the paralyzing dread of past abuse. The survivor's reactions often appear entirely disproportionate to the present situation because they are not reacting to the present at all. They are fiercely defending themselves against the ghosts of their past. These traumatic echoes frequently force couples into the most rigid and punishing variations of the demon dialogues. Driven by an overwhelming need to control an unpredictable world, a survivor might become intensely demanding, highly critical, or fiercely possessive. Alternatively, exhausted by the constant internal battle and terrified of their own vulnerability, they might retreat behind impenetrable walls of emotional numbness, locking their partner out completely. To the bewildered partner, this behavior can feel like a relentless, unprovoked assault or a freezing rejection. Without a clear understanding of trauma's mechanics, the partner instinctively pulls away, unwittingly confirming the survivor's deepest fear, that their pain is toxic and their loved one will ultimately abandon them. Healing these profound wounds within the context of a relationship requires immense courage and a deliberate, patient application of the principles of attachment. The partners must work collaboratively to separate the traumatic echo from the present reality. The survivor faces the agonizing task of recognizing when their panic is a ghost from the past rather than a failure of their partner. Instead of lashing out in self-protection or retreating into the void, they must learn to take the monumental risk of turning toward their partner and articulating their terror. They must find the words to say that they are drowning in old memories and desperately need a lifeline. For the supporting partner, the task is equally demanding. They must learn to absorb the sudden shockwaves of the survivor's panic without taking it personally. When the survivor retreats or attacks out of historical terror, the partner must remain a steadfast, non-defensive presence. Their role is not to fix the traumatic memory, to offer rational solutions, or to insist that the survivor simply move on. Their singular, vital function is to be the immovable anchor. By offering unwavering reassurance, gentle touch, and profound emotional engagement exactly when the survivor feels most broken and unlovable, the partner helps rewire the traumatized brain. Through countless repetitions of this process, of the survivor risking exposure and the partner responding with unshakable care, the traumatic echoes begin to lose their paralyzing power. The relationship transforms into a living sanctuary. The trauma is not erased, but its meaning is fundamentally changed. It is no longer an isolating sentence of silent suffering, but a shared burden that has ultimately forged an unbreakable bond. In this profound emotional alchemy, the couple discovers that the deepest wounds of the past can be healed by the active, responsive love of the present.